Hey there! Welcome to this week's message from Centralia Christian Church. We are so glad that you are listening, and we hope this message will encourage and inspire you to walk closer with Jesus. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into the Word together.
So as we continue to build upon the foundation that's been set for us over this in this series over the last several weeks, if you've missed any part of the series, I just encourage you to grab a CD in the back, or you can also go online and download it and get caught up with us. But we want you to get into the habit. We want you to see the importance of relationships. And we want you, we hope that you will get, instead of being side to side, that you guys would become face to face, that you would fight for relationship versus fighting with each other in relationships. And so if we're going to fight, we can either, one, fight for our relationships. We can either tear down the walls that can be built between us, one brick at a time. We can be ridiculously in charge of the 100% of the things that are our problems, right? Whatever that is. And so when we're ridiculously in charge of this and we tear down one brick at a time, that's an important piece. But if we don't, if we choose not to do that, then we will just fight with each other all the way into divorce court. We could fight with each other all the way into a lifeless, loveless marriage that in no way brings honor and glory to God. So the question that we talked about the first week is are you going to fight for relationship or are you going to fight with? And the truth I left you with, and a challenge was an invitation to make that shift from fighting with that person, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse, whatever it is, to fighting for that relationship. And so again, I believe that could be a game changer in your relationships. Last week, I attempted to identify another shift, another game changer in the marriage relationship, and really in any relationship that is, as I was thinking about this, and that's the shift from comparison to contentment. The Bible has a lot to say about those themes, especially in our social media-driven world, right? I mean, a comparison is really an issue on steroids. That's how I like to look at it, right? Day in and day out, we compare the behind-the-scenes footage with everybody else's highlight reels, right? Let that sink in. When you're on Facebook and when you're on Snapchat, when you're on Instagram, when you're on all that, all you are seeing is somebody's highlight reel. You are not looking and seeing what's going on behind the scenes. And so what you see on social media, again, like I said, it's not the truth of really what's going on in that person's life. They don't post those things. And yet we suffer in our life from this comparison, believing that our life isn't as good as theirs when we actually have no idea what their life is like. And so in the end, we learn that comparison really is a lose-lose situation, because either you come out of that comparison feeling superior or you come out of that comparison feeling inferior. But either way, it's a lose-lose situation, neither of which is healthy. And so friends, we have to remember that the grass is not greener on the other side. Like my daughter Ava said, we got home last week and we sat down and she's like, "Dad, you totally missed a fabulous illustration. I can't believe you didn't put it in there." I'm like, "Oh yeah, well what was that?" And she says, "The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it." And I was like, "Okay." So she's like, "You got to put that in your sermon next week." So I did. That's an ode to her, right? No, but it's true. Wouldn't you agree that the grass is greener where you water it? See, we learn this truth that if we make a shift from comparison to contentment, biblical contentment, then that can be a game changer in our relationships. And so we want to continue the journey this morning to the third game changer, and that is this, from criticism to celebration, okay? And this is an important one because I think we can all agree that there's just a wee bit too much criticism in our world today, isn't there? Right? I mean, wouldn't you agree? Isn't everybody a critic? Everybody in this room's a critic. Everybody in this room has an opinion, right? And it's interesting that you might even agree that we live in a culture of criticism, right? But this culture of criticism, I truly believe, is fueled by this. You ready for this? It's called keyboard courage. And what I mean by keyboard courage is people post things on social media sites that they would never directly say if they were face-to-face with that person. And maybe you've been guilty of that yourself. That's possible. I heard it once said that criticism is like bad breath. You notice it when it's coming out of someone else's mouth, but you're a little nose blind to it when it's coming out of your own. I could be nose blind right now. I don't know, right? And so on your outlines this morning in the dictionary definition of criticism, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. It says this, that criticism is the expression of disapproval or of someone or something based on perceived faults or mistakes. To judge as a critic, to find fault, to blame, or to condemn. And there's really two main categories of criticism. There's either constructive criticism or what? Destructive criticism. Right? One builds up, the other tears down. So let's look at, if you have your Bibles here this morning, and I think I have it up on the screen for you. Robbie will get it there for you. But Matthew chapter 7, in verses 1 through 5, I'm reading from the NIV version today, says this, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your own eye,' when all the time there's this plank in your own eye?" Jesus says, "You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, then," right? So it's not saying we don't help with the speck, but he says, once you've done you, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Okay? If you go over to Romans chapter 14, Paul's talking about this a little bit more. And if you look at verses 10 through 12, he says this, "You then, why do you judge your brother? Or why do you look down on your brother? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat." Do you agree with that? That's what Scripture teaches. That's what Jesus says. He says, you all stand before God. "It is written, 'As surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me. Every tongue,'" not most, not some, every, very, very specific, "will confess to God. So then each of us will give an account of himself to who? To God." I want us to make it clear this morning, I was really thinking about this, that there's a link between criticism and judgment. And the Bible has much to say about both. He talks about the positive and the negative aspects of it. And so for our purposes today, with the time constraints that we have, I really want to zero in on one of the more negative aspects of criticism. I want to focus in on the toxicity that brings to relationships. Dr. John Gottman, right, a psychologist at the University of, I hate to say it, but Washington. I'm just not a Washington fan. I'm not a UW fan. Go Cougs. But anyway, he's a psychologist at the University of Washington, has studied more than 3,000 couples for over 2 decades, and has discovered that there are 4 specific, I call them sin habits, he calls them patterns, and how partners relate with each other in marriage or in friendships or in those things, but specifically marriage, that would significantly contribute to a relationship failure. And they are the following sin habits. Ready? Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And because of their destructive nature to relationship, they've been kind of nicknamed, you ready for this? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of relationship. Yeah. And so guys, this is serious. 2 weeks ago, I used the book of Revelation and the letter to the church of Ephesus to support and draw this parallel between the church being the bride of Christ, right, and how spouses are to relate to one another. Today, I want to go back to Revelation, and I'm going to go to chapter 6, and we're going to try to have a better understanding of the fullness of this metaphor that I think Gottman here is applying to these 4 specific sin habits, these patterns. And really how a husband or a wife can often relate to each other. So jump over with me, if you will, to Revelation chapter 6. I'm going to read 1 through 5. I'm going to skip verse 6, read 7 and 8. And you'll see when you get there why I skipped 6. It says, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. The rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." And then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given the power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. Verse 5, when the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was before me a black horse. its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hands. And then verse 7, it says, when the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, come. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. It says they were given power over the fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. My friends, Gottman's choice here in referencing the four horsemen of the apocalypse, I don't believe is by accident. What's being described here in Revelation 6 is the beginning of the end of mankind on earth, okay? And when things go from bad to worse, when it goes from conquest to war to hunger, death, guys, do not let this metaphor lose its impact this morning. Don't miss the shock value because it's intentional, and each horseman paves the way for the next one. This is a chain reaction, a series of events, each caused by the previous one, each building on the one that came before, increasing in intensity, increasing in its destructive power. And so criticism leads to contempt, which leads to defensiveness, and then to stonewalling, and eventually to destruction, which I will tell you is the complete annihilation of relationship. The four horsemen, right? I mean, hopefully you will begin to understand and pick up what I'm throwing down, because this is some serious stuff here. And so I'd like to give you some quick, simple illustrations and definitions of each of the four horsemen of the apocalypse of relationship, so that maybe today you have a better sense of what they are, but even more importantly, how they play off of one another. And then I want to circle back, because we only have so much time this morning, to dive into the first two this morning. So they're on your outline. Maybe, while we walk through this, would you be willing to do a little bit of self-assessment in your own relationships? Because I think this is important. Friendships, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, husband-wife relationships. But again, it's on your outline. The first blank is this. It's criticism. And the Bible often refers to it as a critical spirit. Okay, criticism is the act of finding fault or judging unfavorably. When you criticize your friend, when you criticize your partner, you attack your partner's personality or character. What you're attacking is their very being. Usually it's with the intent of making yourself right or proving the fact that they're wrong, right? Criticism often includes generalizations such as this: you always do this, or you never do this. Right? Or you're the type of person who ... Now, let me ask you a question here. Don't raise your hands, but how many of you used that terminology this week? Well, you always do that. Or you never do that. Really? Never? Always? My friends, when you hear the words always and never coming out of your mouth, if they're flying around in an argument that you're having, you have now left complaining and now have entered into the criticism zone. When that happens, alerts should be going off in your mind. Arunga, arunga, like whatever that noise would be, right? It would be like, here it is, like the dashboard lights are going on and off. In your earpiece, you're hearing, Houston, we have a problem. Okay? This is how important this is. It's one of the first signals that you're moving in an unhealthy, destructive direction. But the second one, real quickly, is contempt, and that's really, the Bible describes it as a root of bitterness. This is a feeling of disdain or scorn. Okay, you feel it kind of in your guts. You probably have felt that before. Contempt attacks your friend's sense of self-worth or your partner's self-worth with the intention to insult and psychologically abuse him or her. Contempt is bad, right? Contempt is poison. Contempt is toxic. Typical contemptuous comments made by partners to each other include insults or name-calling. It might look like hostile humor, right? Maybe sarcasm or mockery, right? As well as some kind of contemptuous body language, right? It's a tone of voice. It's sneering. Maybe it's a rolling of your eyes. How many of you have done that in an argument? Right? Don't raise your hands. It's okay. Or mimicking or parroting your partner. When I was talking through those, I saw some heads turn a little bit, right? I mean, the first service, I saw some elbows, right? And so here it is, and I saw some head nods, like, meaning that, again, you need, if that's you, you need to circle number 2 because the second horseman is attacking your relationship right now. And so it's important that you understand this. I got a high center, though, on one of them just for a moment. Just walk with me here. Sarcasm. How many of you are sarcastic people? How many of you are passive aggressive? Yeah, that's my kind of people right there. It's such a big one in our world today, sarcasm. And again, I'm not sure why, but it seems like it's sort of part and parcel of the culture in Washington State. It's different here than it's been in any other place that I've ever lived, the sarcasm. And somehow, we believe that magically we can counteract our sarcasm and that will just magically go away because you sent the wink emoji with it, right? Or, come on, people really listen, or JK, for those of you that are older, just kidding, okay? Somehow, did you catch the sarcasm? That's kind of funny. Somehow the sarcasm just magically went away, right? Because you sent them a thumbs up emoji. All right. We've all of us have learned this little rhyme. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but finish it out. Words will what? Never hurt me. That's not true. Raise your hands if you've ever been hurt by sarcastic words. Anyone besides me? Yeah. It's just, the truth is words can hurt. Even if it's completely unintended. We got to keep moving forward. I could spend some time. The third horseman of the apocalypse is defensiveness, which means this is what the Bible describes as unrepentant or not repentant. It's always seeing yourself as a victim and warding off a perceived attack, right? So when partners are defensive, they're really no longer open to learning. They're not really able to even assess the sort of feelings that are being expressed underneath the surface. We're always in defense mode, right? Some typical defensive responses are whining. Don't raise your hand if you're a whiner, but whining is one of them, right? Making excuses. Here's one, cross-complaining. Now, you might not be familiar with this one, but that's meaning your spouse's complaint and then coming over the top of it with one of your own. And so it's like this. You ready for this? What do you mean I never help with the kids? Boom. Right? Or, you always criticize the way I do it. You always criticize the way I load the dishwasher. Right? Or, how about this? Think about it. Do you see kind of what happened there? When that person said, you never help with the kids, or you always complain about the way that I do it, isn't that dangerous? Think about this next one. This is the one I'm guilty of more often than not, and more than I'd like to publicly admit here, but I'm going to do it, is the yes but. Is there any yes butters out there besides me? And here's what that means. It's initially you agree, and then you complain, right? It's yes, but maybe it's repeating yourself without listening to your partner. And last but not least, then is the fourth one, which is called stonewalling. And if we get here, this is super dangerous land. Unfortunately, with the marriage counseling I do, this is where I find most of everybody before we can work backwards. But we're already here at this level. And really, the Bible talks about this is rejection and hate. That's how the Bible describes it. This is withdrawing from interaction. It's withdrawing from the relationship as a way to avoid conflict. And so again, this isn't just a timeout, right? Which I can tell you in relationship, we need to have a timeout chairs for adults. I have a timeout chair I go to sometimes, right? Because I need some time to chill out for a minute because I've got overworked on this thing, right? So it's not just for kids. It's great. If you don't have a timeout chair, you need to find one. It's great. Jay, you should find a timeout chair. Just saying. Okay, so again, as you're watching and walking through this, again, it's not that kind of avoiding. Sometimes being able to go to the timeout chair is healthy, but this is deeper. This is emotional. This is more physical in nature. It's turning away. It's tuning out. It's shutting down. It's avoiding. It's acting busy when your spouse comes into the room. Don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you done that when a spouse or a friend's come in the room? You're like, well, look at this over here, right? Or maybe you flip the switch and now you're obsessively engaging in other things just to avoid it, right? Maybe it's hiding out in your man cave for 7 hours a day, or she shed. We gotta be fair, right? Maybe it's, the silent treatment that doesn't go on for an hour, but it goes on for a week. It goes on for a month. When we're stonewalling, my friends, this is the most dangerous of moments in relationships. Some of those maybe have resonated with you as I walk through them today. Maybe they've hit a little too close to home. And all I can say is good. Good. So what are you going to do about it? Friends, when it comes to criticism, when it comes to contempt, the Bible makes it clear that the heart of the matter is a matter of the heart. The heart of the matter is a matter of the heart. I put that in your outline because I don't want you to miss that. The heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. Jesus once said, he says, out of the overflow of the heart, what? The mouth what? Speaks. That's what Jesus said. Right? Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I think that's what Jesus had in mind when he had read and was talking about Proverbs chapter 23 when he was teaching that. And Proverbs 23 says this, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Do you believe that this morning? That your heart is the wellspring of life? Right? And then James goes over and he reminds us in James chapter 3, and I'm just going to jump over there real quick in verses 8 through 10. He says this, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. You see, James and Jesus are reminding us that criticism is really a heart issue. Rick Warren once said this. He said, a person with harsh tongue has an angry heart. A person with a negative tongue has a fearful heart. A person with an overactive tongue has an unsettled heart. A person with a boasting tongue has an insecure heart. A person with a filthy tongue has an impure heart. And a person with a critical tongue has a bitter heart. Think about that for a moment. And I wonder what would happen if you took some time this next week, right? And you really, really paid attention and you really listened to the words that are coming out of your mouth at home or with your friends or with your spouse or with your kids or at work or with your boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, really, I encourage you, pay attention to that for a moment, right? Pay attention to discover what it's really revealing about the condition of your heart in those environments. Because Scripture makes it very clear that there is a tongue, that the tongue-heart connection is there, right? And maybe that's why the psalmist wrote, I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not what? Sin against you. There is a tongue-heart connection. And so it begs the question, what do we need to hide in our hearts that might serve as the antidote to the deadly poison of criticism that brings contempt, that ushers in the horsemen of the apocalypse of a relationship into our home? See, because I'm wondering if you know that there's nearly 1,000 verses in the book of Proverbs. Did you know that? I do, because I counted them. 1,000 verses in the book of Proverbs, and over 100 of those verses have something to teach us about the power of words, that they either wound or they heal. And it's more than 1 in 10 verses. I was looking at that. I think that's pretty significant, my friends. Because in a sense, I think God is tithing in the book of Proverbs to teach us about the tongue. Again, I only have time to highlight a few of them. They're in their outline on the back. Follow along as I read them, and maybe you should have some pen in hand, maybe even, and grab and circle maybe one or two that just seem to resonate with you today. But here they are, some verses out of Proverbs that there. It says, the mouth of the righteous is the foundation of life, but violence overwhelms the mouth of the wicked. Would you agree with that? Or reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Those who guard their lips preserve their lives, but those who speak rashly will come to ruin. Or the tongue that brings healing is the tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, healing to the bones. From the fruit of his mouth, a man's stomach is filled. With the harvest from his lips, he is satisfied. It says the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And lastly, this one, those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity. I want you to think about those for a moment. So how do we do that? How do we guard our mouths and our tongues? How do we increase the words of blessings that are on the tip of our tongues and decrease the number of times we should have bit our tongues? Anybody bite their tongue this week? Yeah. Mine's kind of bit off, right? So how do we increase those words? How do we more fully partner with the sanctified Holy Spirit in our lives to minimize criticism and to maximize celebration? And I would like to suggest to you today that the way we do that is simple as ABC. But unfortunately, I was gonna put a song right there, the giant ABC, yeah, 1, 2, I was thinking, yeah. But unfortunately, there's a D, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. So it's as simple as ABCD. Okay, here you go. But it's not easy to shift from criticism to celebration. So I like to suggest, beginning with the letter A, here's how we change through that. A great commitment to the great commandment crushes criticism. A great commitment to the great commandment crushes criticism. The heart of the great commandment is what? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. So love, right, is the heart of that. It's an agape kind of love, the kind of love that captured for us, the kind of love that's described for us, that's defined for us. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 8. And this is talking about agape love. It's the antidote to criticism. And it says this, love is what? Love is patient. It doesn't say love feels patient. It doesn't say love feels kind. It doesn't say that love, doesn't feel. No, it says love is, it's an action. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes. It always perseveres. And then in 1 Peter 4:8, reminds us above all, love each other deeply because a love covers a multitude of what? Sins. Guys, this is so important. So let a great commitment to the great commandment crush criticism in your relationship because love wins. Here you go. Shifting from criticism celebration now continues with B, and that is this, to build a culture of appreciation and respect in your relationship. You remember, this is a really important truth. The grass is greener where you water it. Right? The grass is greener where you water it. Friends, this culture of appreciation and respect is about doing the little things often. It's about being intentional. It's about expressing appreciation and gratitude, affection, respect for your spouse. Right? I mean, because the more positive you feel, the less likely you're going to criticize. Would you agree with that statement? And so it's really about doing the little things often. One of my professors when I was in college, his name's Bill Krause, and one of the times we were over at his house and we were with a whole bunch of other married couples, they really took us together and worked with us, and he said, it's easy. He says, the ratio is 5-1. This is the magic formula. And he says, here's how, we relate to doing the little things in our life? And I'm like, 5 to 1. He's like, yeah. If you consistently have 5 or more positive interactions for 1 negative interaction, he says your emotional, relational account will always be in the black. That's what he found for himself, for his life. And if that's true, and let's just agree to say that it's true for the sake of this illustration, what does that really tell us about the 1 negative thing? Think about that for a minute. It takes 5 positive things to cancel 1 negative thing out. But how many of us have had seasons in our relationship where that ratio was flip-flopped? And really, if we look at it, it was 5 negatives to 1 positive. Right? I'm wondering, how are you building a culture of appreciation and respect in your relationship right now? Right? How often are you committed to doing the little things? When was the last time that you got up from the dinner table and said thank you? When was the last time you pulled out a clean pair of socks from your drawer and said thank you? When was the last time you opened the refrigerator, you found it full, and you said, you can say it, we can work on this, we can do it right here. Can we all say thank you? Thank you. We can do this again. First service was really hard. They were like, we had to really work it. Can we say thank you? Thank you. Nobody fell over dead. Right? It works. Thank you. When was the last time that you climbed in the car and it was full of gas and you said, thank you? Okay, good. See, this is good. Right? It's amazing what can happen and what kind of protection that it could be to our relationships if we remain committed to doing the little things often. Appreciation, gratitude, affection, respect. So maybe pay attention to that this week. Moving on to C, shifting from Christian celebration as we learn to a commitment to complain without blame. Complain without blame. This page is taken from Leslie Perot's The Good Fight. I've been watching it on Right Now Media, and it's something that's free to you guys from the church, so if you guys want to get that, just email the church, but it's a good one because it talks about turning your critical comments into complaints, which kind of at first sounds a little counterproductive, doesn't it? But it really helps to keep the emphasis off your spouse, because this isn't about attacking your spouse, it's about owning your part and expressing how you're feeling in that situation. So yes, gentlemen in the room, I just used the feeling word. Okay? I know. I mean, honestly, did you think that I could preach for a half hour on marriage and relationships and all of that and the topic of that and not talk about feelings? Did you really think that? But notice I saved it till the end. Stick with me. It's going to be okay, man. The truth is, how you begin your conversation, how you enter that fight for relationship, right? How you enter that fight for relationship conversation, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. And it's so important for you to use I statements instead of saying, you never pick up your dirty laundry. Right? Or, you're always such a slob. Right? Maybe you could try, I feel frustrated when you don't pick up your laundry. I'm wondering, how can we resolve this? Isn't that interesting how just the change of that? And maybe you're sitting back going, yeah, Pastor, like that's ever going to happen in this house, right? Or maybe this one, I've heard this one last week, not from me, by the way. I have permission to use it. Honey, you always spend too much money. You never ask me before you're making a big purchase. Well, maybe you could have said, honey, I feel like you don't value me when you make a big purchase without discussing them with me first. Can we talk about this? Right? I mean, guys, listen, if you have to write that down on your hand, please do. Like, I'll write it for you. Right? That's huge. But they also suggest what they call the XYZ formula. And again, it's on your outline, and it's really easy there for you to influence. And the reason we're doing this is because this has been such a big issue within our congregation. We have relationships that are hurting and struggling. So I'm going to take the time to walk through this, okay? XYZ formula. It's simple. I mean, just follow the simple construct. So apply it to whatever situation you're in. Here it is. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z, right? It's a way to phrase something that's no longer a criticism, but it's a complaint. So when we're driving down the road and you change the radio station without asking me first, I feel like I don't even matter to you, right? In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. When we're driving down the road and you change the radio station without asking me first, I feel like I don't matter to you. Which is a whole lot better than, you always do that. Who made you the king of the radio? Don't do that. That is not good. Okay? No good. Right? The second one's going to generate a very different response from your spouse, right? The second and third horsemen, they come galloping into the car, contempt, and here comes defensiveness. They're on their way with number 4, stonewalling, and the silent treatment for the remainder of the trip is not too far behind, is it? And so husbands, though our culture might suggest this to you, men, listen, it is not a win if we get the silent treatment. Just letting you know that. It's not a win, okay? And so as I thought about this message more, I came to realize that shift from criticism to celebration wouldn't be complete without D. Do you know your spouse's or your kid's love language? Because at the heart of love language is this understanding that is other-centered. It's this other-centered kind of love. Loving them, celebrating them, right? The way that they most naturally receive love. Whether it's an act of service, whether it's words of affirmation, quality time, whether it's physical touch or receiving gifts, it's other-centered, right? And they can receive that in a way that they'll truly appreciate it. Let me ask you a question. Do you know what your love language is? Do you know what their love language is? Some of you may not be familiar with what I'm talking about. That's okay. I put that information in your outline. There's a web address there you can go and you can take the inventory. But I just encourage you to take the opportunity, let the journey begin of coming to understand how you can celebrate your spouse, your kids, your friends, how you can love them the way that they will best receive it. And even if you're not into this whole love language test, here's what you could do. Why don't you ask your spouse this question? What is it that I do or could do that says I love you? What is it, seriously, what is it that I do or I could do that says I love you? And then whatever they say, do it. The shift from criticism to celebration, friends, I really do think it's as easy as A, B, C, D, right? It's easy, but it's not simple. Again, I think the truth is a great commitment to the great commandment, crushes criticism. When we love the way that God's called us to love, it builds celebration and relationship. And I think the truth is that you and I can build a culture of appreciation and respect in our relationships. And as we do that, it crushes criticism, elevates celebration. And I think that you and I can learn to complain without blame. I think that crushes criticism, celebrates honest feelings. And then we discover when our spouse's love language or our kids' love language, when we can trust, when we love them the way that God has hardwired them to receive love, that will crush criticism. That is the best thing I've done in my family, is to learn that of my kids. It crushes the critical spirit because love covers a multitude of what? Sins. And so I think the truth is making the shift from criticism to celebration will be a game changer. I believe it'll be a game changer in your friendships. I believe it'll be a game changer in your marriages. I believe it'll be a game changer in your, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. Any relationship, this will be a game changer. It'll be a game changer to your families. So would you pray with me?
We would like to thank you for spending part of your day here with us. Our mission here at Centralia Christian Church is to help people build full-time relationships with Jesus. If you would like more info on the ministry or giving opportunities, visit us online at www.centraliachristian.org.